Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that the President of the United States is so desperate, so utterly defeated in his own economic war, that he's literally begging America's closest ally to surrender its sovereignty? What if Trump's obsession with annexing Canada isn't just eccentric rambling, but the flailing of a leader watching his tariff strategy collapse in real time? And what if the Canadian Prime Minister's calm, surgical dismantling of these threats is actually teaching the world a masterclass in how to defeat American economic bullying? Have you ever witnessed a superpower reduced to pleading? Have you ever seen a president stand before his own military generals and pitch the idea of absorbing a neighboring country like he's trying to close a failing real estate deal? It sounds absurd. It sounds like something from a satirical sketch. But this is not satire. This is happening right now. And the fact that it's happening tells you everything you need to know about how badly Trump's economic strategy has backfired. This isn't just another diplomatic spat. This is not normal political theater. The most powerful nation on earth is watching its leverage evaporate as its closest trading partner, its ally of over a century, calmly walks away from American dominance. And the man who promised to make America feared and respected is instead making it look weak, unstable, and frankly unhinged on the global stage. Let's begin with what actually happened, because the details matter, and they reveal just how extraordinary this moment truly is. During a speech delivered to military officials on Tuesday at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Trump once again returned to his recurring fantasy. He told assembled generals that Canada should simply join the United States to receive his so-called Golden Dome missile defense system without charge. This wasn't a private conversation. This wasn't an off-the-cuff remark caught by a hot mic. This was a prepared speech to the nation's highest-ranking military officers. Trump claimed that Canadian officials had contacted him a couple of weeks prior to inquire about joining his missile defense shield. He recounted his response, suggesting that Canada should simply become the 51st state and then receive the defense system at no cost. But here's the critical detail that reveals the desperation. Trump himself admitted during the speech that he was unsure if his proposal had any significant effect. Think about that for a moment. The President of the United States publicly acknowledged that his own pitch isn't working. That's not confidence. That's a plea wrapped in bravado. Now, let's talk about the context that makes this so revealing. Trump's latest outburst comes at a moment when his tariff war against Canada is failing spectacularly. He has imposed punishing duties on Canadian goods, 100% import taxes on pharmaceutical drugs, massive tariffs on furniture, kitchen and bathroom items, and heavy trucks. These are not strategic surgical trade measures. These are the economic equivalent of carpet bombing your closest ally and hoping they surrender. But here's what Trump didn't anticipate. Instead of forcing Canada into submission, his tariffs are galvanizing Canadians to unite against him in an unprecedented way. Polling data reveals that 56% of Canadians have intentionally purchased Canadian products over the past 2 weeks as a direct response to Trump's trade policies. Nearly 60% have made a conscious effort to avoid American goods altogether. Let that sink in. Trump's strategy to bully Canada into compliance has instead triggered a patriotic consumer movement that is actively damaging American exports. This is the exact opposite of what tariffs are supposed to accomplish. Tariffs are meant to pressure the other country's government by hurting their economy. But when the population rallies behind their own products and turns against yours, you've lost. You haven't just failed tactically. You've created a nationalist backlash that will outlast any single policy cycle. Trump has managed to do what decades of Canadian politicians could never fully achieve. He has unified Canadians in opposition to the United States. And this brings us to the man who is outplaying Trump at every turn. Prime Minister Mark Carney. Carney is not a firebrand. He's not a populist demagogue. He's a former central banker, a technocrat, a man who built his career on calm, data-driven decision-making. And that is precisely why he is so effective against Trump's chaos. Where Trump blusters, Carney calculates. Where Trump threatens, Carney deflects with diplomatic precision. Where Trump demands, Carney simply says no. During a face-to-face meeting earlier this year, Carney reportedly told Trump that as a real estate developer, he should understand that certain properties are simply not for sale. Trump's reply was a non-committal, never say never, To which Carney is said to have responded with 5 firm nevers, delivering a lesson in handling aggressive tactics. This is not just good diplomacy, this is psychological warfare. Carney refused to engage with Trump's transactional worldview. He didn't negotiate. He didn't offer a counter-proposal. He simply rejected the premise entirely and moved on. But Carney isn't just saying no. He's actively building an alternative to American economic dominance. While Trump fantasizes about annexation, Carney has been strengthening ties with European partners, securing trade agreements with Indonesia and Mexico, and even partnering with Australia on Arctic defense systems. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand has clearly outlined Canada's 3-pillar foreign policy strategy at the United Nations, focusing on defense and security, economic resilience, and core values. This is not reactive policy. This is a long-term strategic pivot away from dependence on the United States. Prime Minister Carney has been unequivocal that the previous relationship built on ever-increasing integration is now over. Let me repeat that. The Canadian Prime Minister has publicly declared that the era of deepening integration with the United States is finished. This is a seismic shift in North American geopolitics, and it's happening because Trump has made continued partnership untenable. Now, let's address the sheer absurdity of Trump's territorial ambitions from a political standpoint. Even if Trump were serious about annexing Canada, even if he could somehow convince Canadians to agree, which he categorically cannot, his own Republican Party would never support it. Why? Because the political math is catastrophic for Republicans. Canada has a population of 38 million people. If Canada became a state, it would instantly become the second most populous state after California. Canadian voters, with their support for universal health care, strong labor protections, and progressive taxation, would likely introduce dozens of Democratic-leaning electoral votes into the American system. The political reality is that annexing Canada would be a strategic disaster for Republicans, potentially locking them out of presidential power for a generation. Trump's threats are not just unrealistic, they're politically suicidal for his own party. This reveals something crucial about Trump's approach to foreign policy. He operates as if international relations are a real estate transaction, where everything has a price and everyone can be bought or intimidated. But nations are not properties, sovereignty is not negotiable, and national pride cannot be purchased with a missile defense system, no matter how gold-plated Trump claims the dome to be. Speaking of the Golden Dome proposal, let's examine this more closely because it exposes Trump's transactional delusions. Trump has pitched this missile defense system as if it's a generous gift, a protection racket dressed up as benevolence. He's effectively saying, give up your independence and I'll protect you. This is not the language of an ally. This is the language of a mobster offering protection in exchange for control. And the proposed cost keeps changing. First it was $61 billion, then it was $71 billion. Trump appears to be inventing figures as he goes, which suggests he has no actual plan, just a sales pitch he's workshopping in real time. But here's the deeper issue. Canada doesn't need Trump's protection. Canada and the United States have operated the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, jointly since 1958. Continental defense is already integrated. Trump is offering to solve a problem that doesn't exist, using a system that hasn't been fully designed at a price that keeps changing in exchange for Canada's sovereignty. It's insulting, and Carney has treated it with exactly the level of seriousness it deserves, which is none. The timing of Trump's latest outburst is especially telling. It came only days after Pete Hoekstra, the U.S. ambassador to Canada, had publicly stated that the 51st state discussion was a thing of the past and no longer a focus for Trump. Hoekstra explicitly mentioned he had received no instructions to pursue a dialogue on the matter, and that it had been off the table for months. Then Trump gave his speech at Quantico, directly contradicting his own ambassador. This demonstrates his inability to stay on message, his compulsion to return to his territorial fantasies, and the chaos within his own administration where the president and his ambassador are saying opposite things on critical foreign policy matters. And the audience reaction at Quantico was revealing. The military officials greeted Trump's 51st state proposal with noticeable silence. There was no applause, no enthusiasm, no validation. These are the nation's highest-ranking generals, and even they couldn't muster support for their commander-in-chief's territorial ambitions. Adhering to the nonpartisan tradition of the U.S. Armed Services, they remained quiet during his address, but their silence spoke volumes. Even the military isn't buying what Trump is selling.
Now let's talk about what's happening on the economic battlefield, because this is where Trump's strategy is collapsing most visibly. Trump's tariff war with Canada is not just failing to achieve its objectives, it's actively harming American consumers and businesses. Yet he seems unwilling or unable to acknowledge this reality. Rather than engaging in constructive negotiations, he's escalating his threats, which only makes the United States look desperate and unreliable on the global stage.
Trump has asserted that America has no need for Canadian energy, lumber, or automobiles. This claim is so disconnected from reality that it borders on fantasy. The United States and Canada have the most integrated binational economy in the world. Industries have been built on complex cross-border supply chains, particularly in the automotive and manufacturing sectors. A single vehicle part might cross the U.S.-Canada border multiple times before final assembly. Trump's tariff-centric strategy treats this intricate economic web as a simple ledger of wins and losses, ignoring the severe disruptions caused to American businesses that depend on Canadian materials and components. The rising costs are not just absorbed by Canadian exporters. They are passed directly to American manufacturers and ultimately to consumers in the form of higher prices for cars, construction materials, and everyday goods. This is a self-inflicted economic wound. American families are paying more because their president decided to wage economic war on their largest trading partner. And for what? To force Canada to become a state? It's madness dressed up as policy. Meanwhile, Canada is implementing strategic initiatives to lessen its economic reliance on the United States. In response to Trump's aggression, Canadian officials have acknowledged the reality that 75 to 80% of trade is already covered under existing agreements, but they're actively working to diversify. The government is supporting sectors like steel, aluminum, and the auto industry, while simultaneously working to leverage newly signed free trade deals. Canada is notably the only G7 nation with such extensive trade access globally. They're not sitting passively. They're building alternatives. The implementation of the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, with the European Union and Canada's prominent role in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, are concrete policy actions. These aren't just talking points. These are legally binding trade frameworks that create a future where the Canadian economy is not held hostage by the political whims of a single trading partner. Every new container of Canadian goods shipped to Europe or Asia represents a small but significant step away from American economic dominance. This shift, ironically spurred by Trump's America First agenda, may ultimately result in a more globally connected and economically resilient Canada, permanently altering the trade dynamics of the continent. Trump wanted to make America more dominant. Instead, he's accelerating the exact opposite. He's pushing allies away, forcing them to build relationships that don't include the United States, and demonstrating to the world that partnership with America under his leadership is unreliable and potentially dangerous. This entire affair also signals an erosion of the foundational trust that has long defined the U.S.-Canada relationship. The partnership has historically been about more than trade. It's been a cornerstone of continental security, exemplified by the joint operation of NORAD and the sharing of critical intelligence. The idea of the world's longest undefended border was a physical manifestation of a deep, unspoken trust. By treating Canada as a potential acquisition rather than a sovereign partner, Trump introduces a level of transactional cynicism that threatens to poison this historic bond. Allies operate on the basis of predictability and reliability. When the American president openly contradicts his own ambassador and floats ideas of annexation, it sends a chilling message to allies everywhere that long-standing partnerships can be discarded in favor of antiquated imperialistic fantasies. This doesn't just damage relations with Canada, it makes every ally question whether their relationship with the United States is secure or whether they too could become targets of Trump's next territorial obsession. Domestically within Canada, Trump's actions have had the unintended consequence of bolstering Prime Minister Carney's political standing. The constant external pressure from the White House creates a powerful rally around the flag effect. While Carney faces legitimate criticism from political opponents like Pierre Poilievre on domestic policy, it becomes exceedingly difficult for any Canadian leader to oppose a prime minister who is seen as defending the nation's sovereignty against an aggressive neighbor. Trump, in his attempt to bully and dominate, has inadvertently handed his Canadian counterpart a potent tool for national unity. He has become a figure against whom nearly all Canadians can define themselves and their country's values, transforming a diplomatic dispute into a moment of national identity clarification. The more he pushes, the more resolute and unified Canada becomes in its opposition. This dynamic seems entirely lost on the American administration. Prime Minister Carney's electoral success was significantly based on his commitment to stand firm against Trump, a pledge he has fulfilled with considerable skill. His campaign motto, "Elbows Up," a hockey reference for defensive readiness, perfectly resonated with the sentiment of Canadians weary of being pressured by their southern neighbor. In a striking turn of events, Trump's aggressive tactics have backfired to such an extent that they inadvertently contributed to the election of the very leader who is now consistently outplaying him. Perhaps most revealing is how Trump's 51st state obsession demonstrates a profound misunderstanding of Canada and its people. This is a country that has guarded its independence for over 150 years, fought alongside the United States in 2 world wars, and established one of the world's most stable democracies. The notion that Canadians would surrender their sovereignty in exchange for a missile defense system illustrates just how little Trump grasps the concepts of national pride and identity.
Canadians are not Americans who happen to be born further north. They have a distinct national identity, shaped by different historical experiences, different values, and different priorities. They have universal health care. They have stronger labor protections. They have lower incarceration rates and longer life expectancies. By most quality of life metrics, Canada outperforms the United States. Why on earth would they give that up to become part of a country currently tearing itself apart over government shutdowns, healthcare crises, and political polarization? The global community observes this situation with a blend of apprehension and disbelief. America's closest ally is facing threats of annexation from a president who appears to view international relations as a hostile corporate acquisition. This does not project an image of a great America. Rather, it portrays an America that is unstable and untrustworthy to its allies worldwide. Carney's adept management of Trump's provocations provides a model for other global leaders navigating similar challenges. By maintaining a calm, dignified, and unwavering stance in the defense of Canadian sovereignty, he has demonstrated that bullying tactics can be countered with principled leadership and clear communication. Other nations are watching. They're learning that Trump's threats are often empty, that his economic weapons can backfire, and that standing firm rather than capitulating is not only possible, but effective. The irony is that Trump's territorial ambitions are producing the exact opposite of his stated goals. Instead of bringing Canada into closer alignment with America, his threats are encouraging them to seek other partnerships and strengthening their resolve to protect their independence. His 51st state fixation is not an indicator of strength. It is an admission of weakness from a leader unable to accomplish his objectives through conventional diplomatic channels. As Trump persists in these displays, Mark Carney continues to exemplify what effective leadership entails. While Trump dreams of annexation, Carney is focused on cultivating authentic partnerships founded on mutual respect and common interests. The contrast is stark, as is the outcome of this diplomatic contest. Trump's obsession is not just failing, it is backfiring so profoundly that it is fortifying Canadian unity and elevating Mark Carney's stature as a statesman. In his attempt to diminish Canada, Trump has ultimately only diminished himself. The damage inflicted by this approach extends far beyond diplomatic friction. It strikes at the core of the deeply integrated North American economy. The rising costs are not abstractions. They are real price increases that American families are paying right now. Jobs in American manufacturing that depend on Canadian inputs are at risk. The uncertainty created by Trump's erratic trade policy makes long-term business planning nearly impossible. And here is the ultimate tragedy. All of this economic pain, all of this diplomatic damage, all of this erosion of trust, it's for nothing. Trump is not going to annex Canada. Canada is not going to surrender its sovereignty. The 51st state is never going to happen. So what has been accomplished? The United States has alienated its closest ally, damaged its own economy, and made itself look foolish and unstable on the world stage. And for what? To satisfy the ego of a president who cannot accept that not everything can be bought, bullied, or branded. This is the cost of electing a leader who views the world through the lens of transactions rather than relationships. Nations are not real estate. Alliances are not deals. And sovereignty is not for sale. The sooner American leadership understands this fundamental truth, the sooner the country can begin to repair the damage that has been done. But as long as Trump continues down this path, Canada will continue to walk away. And the world will continue to watch, learning the lesson that partnership with Trump's America is a risk not worth taking. The question now is not whether Trump will succeed in his fantasy of a 51st state. That ship has sailed. The question is how much more damage will be done before this madness ends. How many more allies will be pushed away? How many more economic opportunities will be squandered? How much more trust will be destroyed? Trump is stunned that Carney won't bend. But the only stunning thing here is that Trump ever thought he would.